This is one of those stories they make movies about. A film based on this story was shown at the Cannes Film Festival in 2021, where it received an award in the Special Jury Prize category. Perhaps the film itself wouldn't have been particularly interesting if not for one nuance: the real story on which it's based. At the beginning of the story, it's necessary to say a few words about a cartel called Los Zetas. Its origins are considered to be the 1990s. Back then, and for a couple of decades after, it was a sort of elite unit of another cartel, the Gulf Cartel, which we've already talked about in our video about the FBI's most wanted people. So, Los Zetas were part of the Gulf Cartel for a long time. The members of Los Zetas are deserters from the Mexican army, people who already have good military training behind them. In 2010, Los Zetas broke away from the Gulf Cartel and became so strong that they even controlled most of Mexico for some time. The cartel mainly deals with things typical for criminal syndicates: illegal trade, racketeering, kidnappings, robbery, and the like. Cartel members are known for their cruelty and violence against their victims. The cartel's brutality is most vividly illustrated by incidents from 2010 and 2011. In the first of these, the cartel kidnapped an entire bus of immigrants with tragic consequences. Then in 2011, multiple victims were discovered on one of the ranches. These were ordinary peaceful residents whom Los Zetas had targeted. Some of the kidnapped were recruited into the cartel. The rest were killed. The territory under this group's control included the city of San Fernando, where our story begins. On the morning of January 23, 2014, a 20-year-old girl named Karen Rodriguez was driving to her mother's store. It was a small cowboy clothing store. Karen was essentially in charge of this store at this stage of her life. Her mother Miriam, who had once opened this store, spent most of her time working as a nanny in Texas, USA. She came to Mexico to visit her daughter only when she had days off, which didn't happen very often. As a result, the management of the store was on Karen's shoulders. At some point, two trucks appeared on the left and right of the girl's car. There was nowhere to go. The girl was forced to stop the car, and although she had no choice, expectedly, this didn't lead to anything good. Two men climbed into the girl's car. They tied her up and laid her on the back seat, after which they drove to the house where the girl lived. While Karen was lying in the living room of her mother's house, the kidnappers searched the house for valuables. Suddenly there was a knock on the door. An unsuspecting mechanic, a friend of Karen's uncle, came to fix one of the family's cars. The kidnappers weren't expecting a visit from a random witness. Now they had two hostages. They loaded both into the car and disappeared. However, the mechanic, unlike Karen, was later released without any demands. For Karen, her family had to pay a ransom. The girl's mother and father were no longer living together, but the kidnapping of their daughter united them again. For the ransom, Karen's mother Miriam took out a bank loan. The family strictly followed the instructions. Karen's father left a bag of money at a bus stop, as the kidnappers demanded. Then he waited in vain at the local cemetery while the kidnappers, as was said, were supposed to bring his daughter. Expectedly, this didn't happen. In those years, and probably just as now, the police were losing the battle with the drug cartel. By and large, seeking help from the police made no sense. Karen would simply become one of tens of thousands of missing persons. For this reason, Miriam, the mother of the kidnapped girl, began seeking a meeting with someone from the Los Zetas cartel. She managed to contact a person nicknamed El Jr. He agreed to meet with Miriam in one of the city's cafes. At the meeting, Miriam begged him to return her daughter. The guy said he wasn't involved in Miriam's daughter's kidnapping. However, he added that for a certain fee, he could help with her search. Their conversation in the cafe was constantly interrupted by a radio that the guy had on his belt. Periodically, someone addressed the guy through it. This is how Miriam learned that the real name of the person who promised to help was Salma. That day, Miriam gave him $2,000. Expectedly, Miriam was deceived this time too. A week later, he stopped answering calls. Sometimes others would call, claiming they were the kidnappers. They needed a little, $200, $300, $500. Each payment ignited new hope in Miriam Rodriguez, and with each unsuccessful attempt to return Karen, the woman increasingly fell into despair. Miriam moved into her eldest daughter Azalea's house. In total, Miriam had 3 children, Karen, Luis, and Azalea. The last left crime-ridden San Fernando. Karen stayed in it to help her mother with the store. One morning, after another payment, Miriam came down to Azalea and said she understood that Karen would never return. She said this calmly, without any emotions. From this moment began what distinguishes this kidnapping from tens of thousands of others, committed by cartels. After talking with the mechanic, who was also kidnapped by criminals that day, the day of Karen's kidnapping, Miriam, based on the description the mechanic gave her, realized that Salma was that guy to whom she had given $2 for help in finding her daughter and was one of her kidnappers. It took Miriam several weeks to find a couple of his photos posted on Facebook, knowing only the kidnapper's name. In one of the photos, next to Salma stood a young woman in a uniform from an ice cream shop in Ciudad Victoria, a city located 200 kilometers from the site of Karen's kidnapping. Miriam moved to Ciudad Victoria. There she found the workplace of the woman from the photo. For weeks, she watched the store where the woman from the photo worked. Miriam hoped that sooner or later, one of her daughter's kidnappers would come to the store, Salma. After several weeks of surveillance, this actually happened. Miriam waited until Salma and the girl left the store and followed them. This is how she learned the address where her daughter's kidnapper could be found. To learn more about him, Miriam pretended to be conducting various population surveys. Under this pretext, she interviewed neighbors living in the same house that Salma and the girl entered. Gradually, in the course of conversation, lulling the neighbors' vigilance, Miriam learned from them how often Salma visits this house, who the woman he lives with is, and so on. So that Salma wouldn't recognize her, the woman had to cut her hair short, dye it a radically different color, and also wear large black glasses. This way, she managed to compile a real dossier on one of her daughter's kidnappers. But as it turned out, this wasn't enough. With the collected information, Miriam turned to the authorities, local, state, federal, but no one helped her. She dragged her files everywhere, and every no they told her was never final for her. Eventually, she found a federal police officer willing to help. This person, whose name is not disclosed, said in an interview, "The details and information collected by this woman working alone were incredible. Helping her track down the people who kidnapped her daughter was the greatest honor of my career." Eventually, the police did issue an arrest warrant for Salma. However, by that time, he had already fled the city. Disappointed, Miriam doubled her efforts to identify the remaining participants in the kidnapping. The key to all of them was Salma. Soon the woman had a stack of photographs in which Salma posed with other cartel members. Then pure chance helped the case. It was September 15, 2014. About 8 months had passed since Karen's kidnapping. Miriam's son Luis, by pure chance, saw Salma on one of the city streets. Luis immediately informed his mother and the officer who was helping her. As a result, Salma was arrested that day. The interrogation filled in the gaps that were in Miriam Rodriguez's data, and so the police came to another participant in the kidnapping, Oscar Manuel Solis. The guy was only 17 years old. Even by cartel standards, he was still young. This young guy was obviously easier to crack than the previously arrested Salma. Of course, being at such a young age in a police station during interrogation, the guy was very nervous, or even rather very frightened. Besides the police, Miriam was also in the interrogation room. At some point, the guy said he was very hungry. Miriam took her lunch out of her bag and gave it to him. The officer turned to her. "Why? He doesn't deserve your kindness." To which Miriam replied, "Whatever he did, he's still a child, and I'm still a mother." Perhaps it was precisely because he was softened by Miriam's kindness that the guy began to cooperate. He led the police to an old ranch. The abandoned house located on the ranch was full of bullet holes. This old ranch was one of the places where the cartel brought kidnapped people. Miriam Rodriguez rummaged through a pile of things that were in the house. In it, she found a blue scarf, the same as her daughter had. In parallel with this, the police were conducting excavations in the area that the arrested guy indicated. Each new layer of earth exposed more and more pieces of human bones. Analysis only confirmed what Miriam already knew. In the pile of these bones were the remains of her daughter Karen. On the way back, Miriam stopped at a barbecue restaurant at the entrance to the dirt road leading to the ranch. Sometimes she had lunch there. However, since her daughter's kidnapping, she was there for the first time. At one of the tables sat a girl Miriam knew well, Sylvia Ventura. This was a girl about 20 years old. Her mother had a difficult life, so Sylvia had a troubled youth. Miriam sometimes helped this girl, giving her daughter's things. Entering the restaurant, Miriam greeted the girl. Then she asked the girl if she had heard that Karen had been kidnapped and killed, to which the girl answered no. By that time, almost everyone in the city knew about Miriam's fight with her daughter's kidnappers. Therefore, such an answer seemed strange to the woman. A couple of days later, a guess came to Miriam's head. Perhaps Sylvia was somehow involved in Karen's kidnapping. Maybe she was even specifically watching the road leading to the ranch. As before, after spending a couple of days searching for new evidence on the internet, Miriam found a common photo of the kidnapper and Sylvia in the profile of one of her daughter's kidnappers who was already in prison. As with the ice cream shop, Miriam waited 4 weeks outside the prison during visiting hours until finally Sylvia came to visit one of her daughter's kidnappers. Miriam had the police arrest Sylvia. It was discovered that some of the ransom calls were made from her house, and most importantly, it was she who gave the cartel the idea to kidnap Karen. Sylvia knew that Karen mostly lived alone, and that money could be extracted from her family as ransom. So another person involved in Miriam's daughter's kidnapping went to prison. But Miriam Rodriguez wasn't going to stop her little war with the cartel even at this point. Months went by, and Miriam Rodriguez continued to fill her bag with evidence. However, with each day, the traces became weaker. Some of the guilty were dead, others in prison. Those who were still on the street tried to start a new life in various capacities: taxi drivers, gas station attendants, or, as in the case of Enrique Flores, became church acolytes. Miriam went to Aldama, a small town with a population of about 13,000 people. There she paid a visit to the guy's grandmother. With a heavy sigh, the elderly woman told her that the guy had always been trouble. However, now at least he goes to church. Of course, Miriam started attending church services. There she found another of her daughter's kidnappers. When the police arrived and arrested him inside the chapel, the parishioners could hardly believe it. One asked Miriam for mercy. She smirked. Where was his compassion when they were killing my daughter? Next on her list was a man now working as a flower seller. By that time, he had already retired from cartel affairs. But did that matter? For more than a year, she searched for him. She even managed to befriend the guy's unsuspecting relatives. When she finally found him, she got too excited and approached too close. The criminal recognized her even despite the hat and dyed hair. He started running. However, 56-year-old Miriam cornered him. Of course, it would have been nothing for him to deal with her. But she had a revolver. "If you move, I'll shoot you," she said, and held him in that position for almost an hour, waiting for the police to arrive. So over 3 years, Miriam Rodriguez managed to put 10 people in prison who were guilty to one degree or another of Karen's kidnapping her daughter. In 2017, on May 15, the date on which Mother's Day is celebrated in Mexico. In the evening, Miriam Rodriguez arrived at her house. A few weeks ago, she had broken her leg while tracking down another girl involved in her daughter's kidnapping. With difficulty, she got out of the car. At that moment, a white Nissan pulled out from around the corner. For a second, it stopped next to Miriam. At that moment, shots rang out, and the Nissan disappeared. Miriam was fatally wounded. People on the street tried to help her, but tragically, she did not survive. 2 months before this, two people who had gotten there, thanks to Miriam, escaped from prison, including the above-mentioned church acolyte Enrique Flores. Following the investigation, the police managed to arrest him and several more people from the cartel involved in Miriam's death. This was probably the expected finale of a confrontation with such a powerful group as Los Zetas. She most likely understood this herself. She repeatedly said that she wasn't afraid of death because she had already died. When the cartel killed her daughter, Los Zetas did kill Miriam too, but one gets the impression that she still won her little war against the cartel. After all, who looks strong in this story and who looks weak? A multi-thousand strong cruel cartel that was frightened by a desperate elderly woman, or her, Miriam Rodriguez,